advance the money for me to do that. In fact, one of the institutions was a local building society from in the Albury region. So it wasn't just the banks, it was some of the smaller... Yeah, well, I lived there for 20 years. I appreciate there are... maybe the banks should be taking a greater interest in the reality of the economy and learning lessons. I agree with that.
They haven't.
Yeah.
And unfortunately the speculation has gone through the roof once again globally. No bankers went to jail after 2008.
That's true.
2008, and you know, in some cases they got small fines.
Yeah.
I mean, I think now that, you know, the Royal Commission is going to wrap up very soon in February next year, the government is under no obligation to adhere or to adopt any of the recommendations from this Royal Commission. Therefore, it's incumbent on the people of Australia to insist upon those changes being carried out and given its proper debate and discussion in Parliament. And the outcome that we would like to see, first and foremost, is structural separation of banking. When I say we, Citizens Electoral Council, our party believes that the only way to protect the savings and deposits of ordinary Australians is to keep commercial banks separate from investment banks and the vertical integration model ended. So we have a system where those who take risk on investments, they win, they lose, they pay the price.
Right.
Those who want normal, everyday, safe deposit accounts, they have them. There's a high degree of structural separation, like we once had before the deregulation era.
So NAB and Commonwealth Bank, they've got, you are suggesting sort of commercial sides to their operations.
We tell the big banks, the mega banks, that they have to split up. They take away their superannuation divisions, insurance divisions, and other cross-selling of products. They move the investment side of banking out of their commercial side. Right. They have a period of time to do that. They should do it voluntarily.
Two separate companies? Is that
separate buildings, two separate boards, two separate companies. Okay. To prevent this problem of too big to fail, but also to create a sound system for deposits to be guaranteed, and so you don't have the problem of governments having to rescue banks with toxic debts like we had 10 years ago. And this is a big fight. There's not just us in Australia saying this. There are experts from the United States, Britain, across Europe and in Asia who say this is a must step for a sounder banking system. We've gone a little too far down the track of financial deregulation and banks self-policing, which we've seen doesn't work.
A very quick final story from me. The small town of Albury hit the news, the financial news in Australia, about 7 or 8 years ago, because a small financial services company called Tolhurst Securities, I think it was, which had a financial services license in Australia, was taken over by some offshore fraudsters based in Hong Kong. And they converted it into something called Trio Capital. Does that name ring a bell with you at all?
No,
it was the largest superannuation fraud in Australian history. A financial blogger in Sydney, a guy named John Hempton, from a firm called Bronte Capital, got a tip-off that he should have a look at Trio Capital and its associated entities because of some aspects of their trading results. And he spent a couple of days perhaps doing internet searches, and what he found alarmed him so much that he wrote to Treasury and ASIC and APRA and said, you need to look closely at this mob. And within a couple of weeks, the authorities moved in and shut them down. Unfortunately, $175 million of investors' money, in many cases superannuation investments, had been looted and sent to offshore tax havens in the British Virgin Islands and Hong Kong. And there was a parliamentary inquiry into the collapse, and I was a retired tax officer who had read the newspaper reports about the Trio Capital matter, and the newspaper reports indicated that every man and their dog should have known that there was some dodgy stuff going on with Trio Capital. But apparently ASIC and APRA and the ATO and the other organisations hadn't tumbled yet. And I had a meeting with Bill Shorten, who was then the Assistant Treasurer and Minister for Superannuation, the head of ASIC, Greg Medcraft, and a guy from APRA, Ross Jones. I travelled to Sydney at my own expense as a retired tax officer, and I gave them a briefing on where the ATO had missed the signals, ASIC had missed the signals, APRA had missed the signals, that these guys were dodgy, and they...
Curious to know, did the regulators each blame each other? Did they each blame the other division for the failure?
Well, there was never any confirmation of the shortcomings of the agencies. I regarded it as one gigantic cover-up.
Which is one of the things that has come out of this Royal Commission about the lack of rigour and intellectual rigour of our regulators.
Absolutely.
And self-criticism.
Absolutely. So I'm all in favour of holding the regulators to account too. I listened to the questioning of...
We must do it. We have to, because APRA and ASIC and AUSTRAC, and there's too much of a degree of separation in the regulators.
Yeah.
Where they each could palm off. You know, it's saying it's not our job to do this. It's
right.
Those guys over there, and they can pass the buck between each other every day to Sunday. We need to have a strong regulator that is not captured by the banks, as one senator said.
Right.
Not captured by the banks, not stacked full of former bank executives. We need a regulator that has the legal courage, legal clout, and not just hired from the banking industry, but that they're prepared to take those cases right through to their conclusion in courts, not shy away from the courts where there's a clear case of criminal behaviour. But also we need a regulator that's not going to feed the bubbles in the financial system. Maybe
the regulators need some civilian volunteers, such as yourself and me, to just enter the fray and give them alternate views of some of the stuff that's going on.
I'd suggest, get on it.
Mate, thank you very much.
Thank you.